Oh, go ahead, Pat.
Bonjour, Oni Kinawea. Welcome, Northern Superior citizens, to our virtual session on citizenship. You've been Dogsjig, those that belong to our communities. We're going to take about 2 hours to give some presentations and very key important information that you need to be aware of, and some activities that are going to be implemented very soon. But before we get started, we have our elder Donna Dabowski is going to start us off in the proper way with the rendering of Good Way When God's in the Anishinaabe, one Anishinaabe family. Now, how Donna?
How bushel? Did the quitting the go nishabit queen dog gigon to them away. She can't in not magna. Mr. Jacquet, me great chine the bench get me great chanonic cook Miss Sonic, Miss Shumsonic quick me gum gay no chibit go big, jibs in Dutch cake. Jibby toy gay, you know, she can do sick. Jibbin not more young, so when me knock the young, when I get in system on, when I get in system of young, one that na, I've seen Dutch cake, when you know. Chicken mod madan go down Gisanish Mishmanda Jaquetiding. So if you just follow along with me there on the go down Gisanish Deben get Gisan and Nishnabe na king. Give it one god and him the what soon. Shkode be ke no then give it go store and we not doing me my pishak mekong. Deben get gimme non get stowing the oak and Nishnabe no one not dojen. Nanden Nishwasik no maduinan. Sagedwin, Debwewin, Naden Moin, Bukawin, Baden Diswin, Gwekwatsuin, Minosh, Agdewin. Devin Kete Kimin win Aged Bunwin Agdwending. Kaminaden Danagabe Shoybuk, Minogen Nangomego Shoybuk, Minoge Abewan Shoybuk. So this is our preamble that's part of our Chinook Nigewin that's recited when we have any gatherings, any meetings, and it sets the tone, the foundation for, and lays out those principles that guide us in our discussions. So with that, I say miigwech, 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 miigwech.
Miigwech.
Now,
Yeah, and there's important teachings in every line in that Good Way When God's that are applicable to everyday life. But tonight we're going on a session here that's going to talk about probably two primary objectives, maybe three, I'll say. The first being that we're sending a strong message to the government. During the constitutional talks, the leadership of our communities put out a strong declaration that reminded the government that we are nations, we always have been nations. And this declaration that we're putting forth is a result of a session that was held in Sault Ste. Marie in the latter part of January, to talk about sending a statement to the government to quit tinkering and monkeying around with determining who our citizens are. The Indian Act registration system is designed to eliminate our people. I'm going to repeat that. The Indian Act registration system is designed to eliminate our people. In fact, we have one community, Mississaugas of Scugog, as of 2013, has no one eligible to be registered as a status Indian anymore. But we're going to explain how important the development of our own citizenship laws is crucial to this discussion. But one of the things we want to do is send the government a strong message that they have some processes going on, which we're going to describe to you shortly, that is just another tinkering that only delays things by one generation. We are putting forth a strong statement to say that we are the only ones that can determine our citizenship. We know who our people are. We know who our families are. The second part, and that is going to be, there's a draft done up, and it's going to be talked about at the upcoming regional meetings. And the regional meeting for Northern Superior is April 23rd in Thunder Bay, but there's regional meetings happening in the other regions as well, April 16th, April 10th, and tentatively April 29th. And we're setting a date around May 9th to have what we would call the final draft that will go to the Grand Council the week of June 3rd. And we'll be sending a strong message to the government about how they got to stay out of the business of determining who we are. Elder Gordon Wandabes used to say, a duck is a duck, a moose is a moose, and the Anishinaabe is an Anishinaabe. You can't be anything else. The second objective is little bit longer term, and that's the work that's got to be done in every one of our communities to have a very, very comprehensive discussion about determining our citizens. There's lots of factors involved. Marcia's going to talk a little bit about that and about how crucial it is to have that discussion. And then the third thing, hopefully, as an objective coming out of this, is to talk it up with your neighbors, talk it up with your families about how crucial this issue is, and you know, talk to your leadership in your communities to make sure that you know we begin this this dialogue on this very important issue. You know, we cannot afford to lose another Anishinaabe. So that's the objective of tonight's session. I'm going to ask our Northern Superior Regional Chief to Mel Hardy to come in. Mel has been, you know, the regional chief up in your area there now for some time, and also a former chief. He holds the portfolio in natural resources and health issues, but he's been very active on the political scene, advocating on behalf of the Northern Superior communities and all the Anishinaabe communities for that matter. So we welcome Mel Hardy.
Bonjour, Zongizi. Zongizi de go. Bonjour, Kinawe, Zongizi de go, Makok Todum, Pijwabik Zagi, Nishabak Donjui. Mel Hardy, I was given the name, a strong one for the people, was handed down from a chief. So I just want to say, bonjour. And I do want to say, welcome to our cousins, our esteemed elders, fellow community members, and any come up to be on the call. I'm honored to be before you today to discuss a matter that's very close to our hearts, self-determination. As First Nations peoples, we have always known that our future is in our own hands. For centuries, our ancestors resisted colonization, fought for their rights, fought for our rights, and preserved our culture. Despite the legacy of residential school, forced assimilation, and systemic racism we have endured. Today, we stand at a critical juncture where we can reclaim our rightful place as self-determining nations. Self-determination is not just a concept; it is a fundamental human right. It means that we, as First Nations, have the authority to govern ourselves, to make decisions with our lands and resources, and to determine our own future. It's not a privilege, but a right that's enshrined in the United Nations Declaration of the Rights of Indigenous People. So what does self-determination mean for us today? It means that we must continue to assert our sovereignty, to defend our lands and waters, and to build our own institutions. It means that we must work together as nations to create a brighter future for our children and grandchildren. So let us stand united in our pursuit of self-determination. Let us show the world that we're capable of governing ourselves, of managing our own affairs, and creating a better world for all.
Thank you for that strong commentary because, you know, the rights we have were given to us by the Creator. They're called inherent rights. You know, you know, we can't rely on anyone else, you know, to affect change in our communities. We have to do that. And so this is what part of this process is tonight, is to protect our identity as the Anishinaabe people. And that's why this Bendogjig, those that belong, citizenship discussion is so crucial. So I'm going to ask Regional Chief Marshall Smoke from the Southeast region. She holds the citizenship portfolio for the Anishinaabe Nation leadership, and she's been involved in politics and entrepreneurial activity for many years, and she's been, you know, at the forefront at many levels, you know, community, regional, national, even international, advocating and protecting our inherent rights. And so she's going to, you know, talk about the important work that's going on. So I'm getting my order mixed up here, Marcia. Maybe I better. We get so many papers here. I'm going out of order, so pardon me. My bad. Dr. Jeanette Corbier-Laval is going to speak next. She's a citizen of Okamkong on Cedar Territory, and you know she's been involved with the forefront of fighting for our rights, particularly for the Anishinaabe and children. And you know she has has been working on our Ibn Dagjig Knocknagay, our citizenship law for many years, but she's also at the forefront of the battle to counter this second generation cutoff that the federal government is trying to do. And she did it. She did, along with Mary Laurent and others, spent a considerable amount of time out in the communities, talking about getting direction on what we should be doing about our citizens. And they developed a Ben Dodge draft law. It was not drafted anymore. It was adopted by the Grand Council of the one-parent rule. So we're going to talk about, as I said in my opening comments, trying to build a consensus on getting a declaration approved and to give information about the big picture of citizenship. So I'm going to turn that over to Jeanette. She's again a champion on this, and we need to take a unified stand as our Superior Regional Chief talked about how we have to be united on something like this. So Dr. Jeanette Corbier-Laval.
Oh, miigwech Pat. Ojo, kenawaya. Kadan mikon minim kenawada eventually jik Lake Superior Nishnabek. Giwed nangen indishnikas Nishnabek kwendao. Mino wikwem kong donjaba. Greke endo them. I want to share with all of you in the beautiful part of Ontario around the Lake Superior that it's so important that we do realize what is happening right now currently within our history. So on that basis, I will just take a little step back. And also, it has been shared with you the work that we have been doing in the Anishinaabe Nation, and also how crucial it is right now because the colonizers, the settlers have come up and they're bringing up another version of the Indian Act. So before I get into the work that I have been involved in, I just want to share with you, and I'm sure you all know when you hear the legends and the stories and when our elders talk about how long we have been on this part of the Turtle Island that we call home. And we have all those stories. And I can remember elders talking about different aspects of us living here. And they always use that term, time immemorial. And we don't really, I think about the importance of that. But they knew that we have been here. This is our home. This is where we belong. We don't come from anywhere else. This is our home. This is where we say in the Bendagos, I belong. And then when we say I belong, and then we all know that different nations, and these are indigenous nations in North America, we all have that concept of belonging to our lands where we were born. And we didn't hear about this in the Joganash history when we go to school. That was never shared with us. But the interesting part of all this is that recently this archaeologist by the name of Paulette Stevens, and she's has a Cree background. She's finding evidence during her work as an archaeologist, digging and finding facts that they're finding facts that we've been here over 60,000 years. And when you think about that, that is a long time. But then she's shared that, in fact, it's even more than that. So that term, time immemorial, that we use when we talk about our sovereignty, our inherent rights, it is time immemorial. And then when we think about the settlers and our ancestors, how because of our teachings well, we shared what we had because people were needy. They needed to survive. And that's why we have the settlers here now. And unfortunately, the settlers who came from Europe, the British and the French, when they came here, then all of a sudden they were negating us. And I think the best part of all this is that we were sovereign nations. And we knew that as a sovereign nation, we had our land, and these are definitions for nations. We had the land, we had our people, we have our language and our culture, and the history and the spirituality that goes along with it, and the governance. We had all that, and we knew who our people were. That was our right to decide. That's our inherent right. However, in 1867, when the colonizers were here, first thing they did was draft this legislation called the Indian Act. And that wasn't done really to help us. It was done to get rid of us. It is a form of genocide. And right from the very beginning, it was designed that way. And first thing they did was say, well, what's the best way, or how can we get rid of some people? So some people that were eliminated were those who married non-status people, and then it went to ones who became educated or went into churches, all those categories, and I'm sure you all know it. So that Indian Act has been there for a long time, and that was my personal experience. I had the opportunity to challenge that section of the Indian Act that took away my status. And it was difficult, there was lots of hardship, and it wasn't I started at in 1970, but it wasn't until 1985, under the new Constitution and the Charter of Rights and Freedoms, that I was able to get my status back, which meant that my right to belong to my community, because that's my people, and that's the only place that I want to be part of. And hopefully, when we talk about our responsibilities within our clans and where we want to be, that's where I want to be always, and be able to go back and be buried with my ancestors. I think I said my Anishinaabe name is North Star, and it is so important we know where we belong. But getting back to this Indian Act, then it was designed to eliminate us. And after many, many years, then it was revised a bit. But those revisions still have so much discrimination in them. And now we are looking at more revisions to the Indian Act. This time it's getting worse, and I believe you'll be able to see what is happening, what they're planning. So we must understand that the Indian Act was drafted not to assist us, but to eliminate us. And when we look at our rights, we had our governance. We know who our people are. And the Anishinaabe Nation in 2009, after our consultations with community members, different reserves in Ontario, Mary Laurent and I, we traveled and we went to get comments and talk to our people and say, what can we do about losing our young people, losing our members because of this Indian Act? And the conclusion was that if we can trace our ancestry to one parent, then it was agreed that is the only way that we'll be able to maintain and be inclusive and protect our nation. So we have a one-parent rule now that has been adopted, and I would ask that all of us now within our communities really have a good look at that. And when you think about it, one-parent rule, that's usually how other countries in the world globally, all over, to recognize their people, their citizens. It is through a one-parent criteria. And now when we're looking at our language and our culture, our elders, and it was Chief Keith Knott and his members from his community of Curve Lake, who suggested that we use that word Edbendaugsagic, those who belong. And that is what we have called, and it has been approved for our citizenship law, Edbendaugsagic Naknigewen, and it is available. And there are several other First Nations who have really looked at it and are using that as the basis and developing their own Edbendaugsagic Naknigewen and their own laws based on one parent. But then each of those laws that they're drafting can be revised and drafted to suit their own needs. And we'll be able to have a good look at that. But I want to share with all of you that we had a gathering in Boating, Sault Ste. Marie, the end of January. And after talking about all the work that we have been doing in the Anishinaabe Nation on ensuring that we have that determination, that right, our inherent right, practicing that to determine who our citizens are, we worked on a declaration on Edbendaugsagic, declaration on the right to belong. And if someone in charge of the program here can put it up on the screen, you'll be able to see it. It has Edbendaugsagic self-determination. Now, who's in charge here? Pat? No.
It's on
Well,
there.
someone.
It's on the
I
screen.
I don't see it.
Could you
So,
put that as there? It is.
okay.
Well-
All I had was this.
Next page.
No, it's not coming on my screen. Next page. That's the best way to say it, I guess. Well, unfortunately, it's not coming up here. For
Deanne,
me.
can you slide ahead?
Go to the next page.
There we go. Oh,
Okay.
too fast.
Okay, a little bit. Okay, the initial. See, this page
You're-
here is just
you're gone
saying
too
that.
far.
Well, this one we could talk about, and I mentioned it. It
Jeanette,
is
Jeanette,
going to be a
Jeanette?
change. What?
Let's
Excuse
just
me.
take a second. Let's just take a second here to get the right screen up there.
It's the next slide, I think, Deanne. Or Jeanette is.
Let's
in
take
her
a second, get the right slide up there.
Yeah, there we go. She talked about
Okay,
it.
good.
Okay,
ahead, Jeanette.
so referring back to how this came about, the declaration on Edbendaugsagic, and this is like our prayer that we have for our Constitution. This is going to be the basis for pulling us all together and looking at our own laws on Edbendaugsagic. So it comes from the hearts of our people, as I said, when we gather together in Bauteng. And it is down to 7 core principles that everyone worked on, and we've put it together in one important piece of, it's a declaration. I'm getting, my words aren't coming out here properly, but anyways, it is a declaration. So if we can go on to the declaration, we'll be able to see those core principles.
Next screen.
So next page.
There
Okay.
we go.
Okay, so these are the core principles, and it is written in English here. However, elders and people who are fluent and know our language, we did come together, and this is all in the Anishinaabe as well. So the final declaration will have it in Anishinaabe and the English as well. But as I said, it's been drafted to include 7 principles, which we use in many of our other documents. Number 1 is Creator placed the Anishinaabe on earth along with the gift of spirituality. And we know that when we visit each other, we know that that is what makes us human. That makes us be able to practice the other teachings that we've been given, the gift of spirituality. Creator gave us sovereignty to govern ourselves. Once again, no one can dispute that. Even the governments can't dispute that, because they know when they came here, we were here and we were functioning and we had everything together, so we were able to survive and to govern ourselves. Importantly, number 3, we belong to the land and we follow our own laws. And that's why we have spent time and we called our citizenship law Edbendausichik Naknigewan. Number 5, through our own governance principles and structures, we decide who would belong. And once again, we all talk about this. We say it's not up to anyone outside our communities or outside our nation to tell us who our people are. They don't know. We know. And we know, and we can trace our ancestors. And it's there. And we also can use other resources to document, and if needs be, to know if someone approaches us and they are part of our people. So we do know all that, and we can do it and follow it. Number 6, together, all of us, we take care of each other. Earth, water, air, fire, and all our relations. Basic principles that our nations share and we talk about, and we know this is so important. And when we refer to all our relations, those are all the other living beings that have been placed on this Mother Earth, on the earth that we were given, the land that we were born into. And they are there, and we know what our responsibility is to protect each other and utilize those resources as well. Lastly, we assert and exercise our inherent right of self-determination for the protection of our lands and our Edbendausichik, as affirmed by the Anishinaabe Nation Edbendausichik Naknigewan in 2008. And I did share with you that it has been affirmed. We have the General Assembly of all our people have accepted and approved this. And that's really important. So now all we're doing is saying we have all these beautiful and sacred teachings and principles in the Declaration. We couldn't get them all into the 7 points. And we also heard some other teachings and aspects of a declaration, and it comes under the addendum. And if you see that, it's called a draft because we haven't really presented this to the Grand Assembly yet, but it is in the works and it will be done. And we will be wanting your feedback and your comments before the General Assembly. But if we look at it, it says, we have been on this land and we've governed this land since time immemorial. And as I said, no one can dispute that. Our treaty rights shall be protected and practiced by our Edbendausichik. Edbendausichik, our people, those who belong, our citizens. We will assert our Dodema system. These are all our clans within our teachings. and look at the adoption laws according to our kinships and customs with the key principles of inclusion and equality. And our elders have always shared with us, it is not good, it's not right to exclude our people. So we want to ensure that we are inclusive, and everyone who is part of our nation, we should be welcoming them and saying, yes, you are part of our nation. We welcome you and you belong here. Get the Bendogs, you belong. We will reinforce our traditional governance principles and structures, and that's ongoing right now, and we will continue to do that. We will continue to teach our children our laws and traditional ways as Nishnabek to protect the seventh generation. And just looking at what we're doing within our communities, many of our communities are really stressing the education and the fact that it is our responsibility to ensure our young people, they know our history, they know what our clan teachings are, they know the principles, and will be able to pass them on for those yet to come. As well, we look at the Anishinaabe people, and we will unite to address the changing landscapes of external government policies as they affect the Anishinaabe Nation, our land rights, and our inherent rights. This is a principle that is so crucial right now because we can see what's happening away from our communities, away from the places we call home. But we know we have that inherent right, and we can make positive policies for the benefit of our people. So we will continue to practice and protect our spiritual laws, as this is our connection to Creator, and this is who we are. That aspect of our people and our connection to the Creator. Every morning we give thanks to the Creator for another day, and we know this is so important. That's why we have this in our addendum as well. It is a principle that's important. Furthermore, we look at the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous People, that's called UNDRIP, which reinforces our inherent right of self-determination. And we can use that because there's key aspects of that declaration that has been done at the United Nations. And it's, sorry about that, there's visitors into the room here, but it'll be dealt with. So we could refer to Articles 3, 4, 8, 9, 33, 39, 42, 46. If you have a copy of the United Nations, you can refer to those aspects, and that just supports us. Those are good resources to use. They will also be available on the website of the Anishinaabe Nation. So altogether, this work that has been done by our people within the Anishinaabe Nation under our chiefs in the regions, it will be available for discussion, as I said, at the Grand Assembly that will be taking place soon, and in the 4 regional gatherings. But I guess I would like to share with you that it's so crucial right now that we have that sense of unity. We are a strong nation. We have been a strong nation, and we will continue to be that strong nation and support each other, so we will be able to make our voices heard. And as I said, it is our right, and we will let the other parties here in Canada know that we will be recognizing who we are, and they will have to recognize us. And we can do that with a united voice, and we will have this declaration as our document to support our constitutions. And this document then will support any of the work that we will be doing when we say we know who our people are. And it will be under the Edbendagsujiknaknigewan, the law for our people who belong. So I am available for any questions later on and also at the office. Aha, miigwech gibisinduik.
Yeah, Jimmy Gwitch, Dr. Corbier Laval, and one of the very important aspects that she touched on is the spirituality of our people. And just so you're all aware, all these important initiatives that go on do go into ceremony, and when we get
That's
the
right.
final copy of the declaration, it'll be going into ceremony as well at the Grand Council. Another point I just want to reinforce here is the hypocritical government. For stability and continuity, all democracies, including Canada, have a one-parent rule, and yet they're trying to shove a
That's right.
two-parent rule down our throats that basically just delay eliminating our people by one generation. So never forget that. That's an important element that Dr. Corbier Laval has brought up. So I'm going to open it up for, is there any questions live with any participants, or as I should have indicated a little bit more at the beginning, if you have a question, you can put it in the chat line as well. And even if you think of something a little later, put it in the chat line and we'll get back to you. And I'm going to also leave a contact person if you come up with an idea or a question or any commentary you have, even on the draft declaration. That there's still time. We're hoping to look at maybe May 9th as the final draft on this thing to be taken to the Grand Council. So I open the floor. Is there anything, Marcy? Is there anybody on the online that has a question?
Not yet, but I
Okay.
encourage everyone to put their hand up or put it in the chat.
Okay.
So just while we're waiting for that, as I said, this work that's going on is very crucial. We can't wait and expect someone else, like the federal government or involvement of any other jurisdiction, like a provincial government or anything, to do anything for us. If we're going to make change, that change has to be from our perspective as Anishinaabe. It has to reflect what your Northern Superior communities want for your citizens and your communities. That's what's important here. This is not even at the end of the day something that the Anishinaabe Nation or Union of Ontario Indians is going to tell you what to do about your citizenship. I hope we have some common principles amongst the overall citizenship laws that are being drafted. But if there is a uniqueness or individual characteristics that you want to apply to your own communities, that'll come out in your discussions in your community, and it's going to take a lot of dialogue. I mean, I don't think there's a super rush, to get a citizenship law developed. But I really encourage that we got to get this started. We can't, let this linger, forever. Every time when we there's a phrase in law called "occupy the field." So if we don't occupy the field here and put our own laws in place that determine our citizenship law, that allows other jurisdictions to come in place. And that's why you see the Métis out there trying to, claim our citizens. That's why you see other groups out there. There are certain groups claiming to be Algonquin that are not even tied to, the Algonquins, the Picnic, Waktanagan communities, or some of the Algonquin communities in the area. They just self-proclaim themselves. And I think there's even been, folks, in the past, I don't know if they're still up there, but there's been people that have even encroached into your territories over there in Superior Region, from other parts of Canada that, are exercising rights that they have no business to be doing. This is your territory, Northern Superior, and, how you do things up there, has to reflect that. So anything yet, Marcy?
No, I think we should just continue.
Okay, we'll move on then.
Okay.
I'm going to introduce Regional Chief Marcia Smoke from the Southeast Region, and Marcia's from Alderville, and she's a very active leader, holding the portfolio on citizenship, also doing work on intergovernmental affairs, natural resources, generally keeping pretty busy, working with the other regional grand chiefs and the the Leadership Council, including the Grand Council Chief and Deputy Grand Council Chief. And she's been around, on the political scene for quite a while, and she's a very skilled entrepreneur at running businesses, but at every level of, provincially, regionally, nationally, internationally, she's been at the forefront of a lot of work. And she's here to sort of tell us, what the other guy's doing, what the federal government is doing to try to tamper again, with what we're trying to say they have no business doing. So I'll turn it over to you, Marcia. She's going to talk about, what this second generation stuff cutoff means and some of the important aspects of, why it's so important that we take the initiative to put in place our way of thinking here. So, Marcia, I'll turn it over to you.
Bonjour, Nigani Makoke Kwayandish Makwandodam, Hamadashkoreyang, and Dunjba. Good evening, everyone, and Miigwech Patrick, Mr. Chairman, for the introduction. It's my pleasure to join the citizens of the Lake Superior region of the Anishinaabeg Territory for this session tonight. The role that I have as a portfolio holder on citizenship for the Anishinaabeg Nation is timely for me. It is something that has been in my sights over my entire lifetime. Spending time on citizenship also falls in line with what I was taught, and that is to never leave anyone behind. After the interventions and lifelong work of our Commissioner, Jeanette Corbière-Lavelle, and ongoing court challenges, we are still living with federal legislation that continues to exclude members of our family, denying them the ability to exercise their inherent rights and our constitutional rights. The second generation cutoff of the Indian Act legislation continues to leave many of our relatives behind, and as time goes on, more and more of our family members are being excluded. The work that we are doing here will continue to set the framework that will bring our relatives back into our family circles. There are two issues that I want to highlight tonight. The first issue is we need to be mindful that there have been many court cases and human rights challenges to the Indian Act as far back as the 1970s that our women have won. And those challenges will forever remain on record that supports the recognition of our rights. With those wins in court, the Anishinaabeg Nation has continued its involvement over the decades, and for the past 15 plus years, they've been guided by our Anishinaabeg Nation Citizenship Commissioner, Dr. Jeanette Corbière-Lavelle. The second issue is more for background and Canada's position. The United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples, known as UNDRIP, was adopted by the United Nations in 2007, but not by Canada. In 2016, UNDRIP was finally adopted here in this country. In 2019, Canada introduced Bill C-15, which created the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples Act. That bill was in part meant to align Canadian laws affecting First Nations with the UN Declaration. The Indian Act is one of those laws. When this bill received royal assent in 2021, the government proceeded to identify all of those pieces of legislation that affects us. And from there, they created the UNDRIP Action Plan. This action plan would essentially implement the UNDRIP Act of the government. And that brings us to where we are now. Under the UNDRIP Act and the UNDRIP Action Plan, the government has taken the position that they want to do what they're supposed to be doing. So creating this collaborative process on the second generation cutoff and Section 10 voting thresholds of the Indian Act are part of it. What they have said, but are not widely publicizing, is that the collaborative process is meant to replace the sections related to membership in the Indian Act. While we are participating in this collaborative process, it's very important that we don't forget about the court cases that were won. Those court cases are all about our inherent rights to determine who our people are. I say this because Canada's agenda is more aligned with the UNDRIP Act and the UNDRIP Action Plan that they created, and it's not based on the actual United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples or the court cases. In fact, what Canada is proposing as part of this collaborative process, citizenship will be based on a two-parent rule. This just delays the second generation cutoff to another time down the road. Their intent is still to get rid of us. Canada has put some timelines on how they are going to proceed, and right now we are on phase 2 of the collaborative process, and Canada wants to wrap up this work by the winter of 2027. Now, as we proceed, this work is not unfamiliar to First Nations. As recent as 2018, the minister's special representative traveled across the country to hear the views of First Nations. In reviewing the proceedings of these meetings, 37 of the 39 Anishinaabe Nation communities participated in the meetings held across Ontario. Those meetings consulted on reforming Indian Act status, band membership, and First Nation citizenship. Since then, many questions have arisen from both the government and First Nations. We want to know what kind of effect an influx of new members will have on our communities. Right now, right across the country, nationally, it is estimated that between 270,000 and 400,000 people would be added to our First Nations. That's a national figure, not Ontario or in the Anishinaabe communities. So along with that comes the bigger questions of funding required to support new members coming into our First Nations, land base, housing and infrastructure, the impacts on health and education, and so much more. And it's important that those questions, to be aware that those questions have been out there for some time. And they are the same questions that arose in 1985 when Bill C-31 came into force. We are now in a place where we are engaging with First Nations, and we have a number of tools that are working on. And Jeanette went through these, but I just want to outline them, 1, 2, 3. So I'm going to repeat them as a reminder. Number 1, we have resolutions from the Anishinaabe Nations Chiefs and Assembly from many years ago that mandate us to deal with membership. Number 2, we have a citizenship law that was developed and adopted in 2009, the Anishinaabe Nation Citizenship Law, known as Edibindogzijig Naknagewin. It is a framework that was established to guide Anishinaabe First Nations when you are doing your work to determine your own citizenship laws. The Edibindogzijig Naknagewin emphasizes our inherent right of self-determination and addresses issues arising from Canada's control over Indian status. It is also where the Anishinaabe Nations, First Nations, adopted the one-parent rule for determining who our members are. And number 3, and now we have a draft declaration that was created on January 29th, 1985 in Sault Ste. Marie, where many First Nations were in attendance. How we got to this draft declaration is we went around the room and asked participants who were community members and leadership what was important to them to have in the declaration. The draft document is the outcome. We made a commitment to take their comments back, put them into this draft declaration, and then hold virtual sessions in each region to make sure we captured the essence of the people's comments. And this is where we're at today. Once additional input is received through these virtual sessions, and anyone who wants to contact Mary Lerone, those will be reflected in the final document. So we will prepare that final draft and present it to the Grand Council Assembly this June for the chiefs to consider for adoption. This draft declaration is meant to be a framework or guiding principles for First Nations to consider when it's time to do your work in your communities. Now, I want to emphasize that the community work is where all the details have to be worked out, and this is not new information. As I mentioned earlier, in 2018, First Nations participated in the consultations with Canada's special representative, And a lot of the concerns and issues were raised back then. So you don't have to try to reinvent the wheel. You can make reference to that information that's already available. It's available online, and have pull out what is important to you, plus your own input from your community members. So those issues are all documented and available on the Indian Affairs website or Indigenous Services Canada website. I'm old school. I stick with Indian Affairs. That's what we all remember. Anyway, this is probably the most recent work where First Nations were involved on the citizenship issue. We are at a stage now where we need to share the information. We want you to have some tools available to support creating your own citizenship law. And what that means is the Anishinaabe Nation is not the one who will be writing up who your members are. That's work that has to be undertaken in your communities. Some of the topics that you will want to address may be gender roles, adoption, birthing, deaths, marriage, totem, belonging, family compositions, kinship, intertribal transfers, and cross-border recognition. And there's much more that can be discussed. Family genealogy will play a big role as you create and implement your citizenship law. This is not a one-size-fits-all citizenship law. Every community has its own unique circumstances, and while there may be some similarities, not every law will be the same. That is why it's very important that the conversations take place in your community to deal with the various situations. It's also important to understand that we have a lot of developments going on across Ontario, specifically where our First Nations are impacted. We need to take control of our citizenship. We have issues and assertions with the Métis Nation of Ontario. We are aware that the Métis are using our Anishinaabe relatives and ancestors to claim Métis citizenship. I was reminded at our Southeast virtual meeting that we also have assertions by the Algonquins of Ontario that they also cannot prove their Algonquin ancestry. And then, of course, we have a whole influx of individuals who are self-identifying as Indigenous. Harms are created on many levels by those who are self-identifying as Métis, Algonquins of Ontario, or Indigenous. From harvesting to rewriting history in Ontario curriculum, to providing consent to government and industry to access resources on our territories, and the list goes on. So we need to face this work head on and create a strong citizenship law that is in the best interests of our communities and our families and our relatives. I want to move on to the presentation slides that have been popping up back and forth here. And the first one I want to address is, I think it's the one before that. It's this one here. We just went past it. There we are. The first one shows how the Indian status currently works. And the terms 6.1 and 6.2 are what we are all familiar with. So as we go through this chart, we can see that with a 6.1 parent and a 6.1 parent, the child will have 6.1 status. With a 6.1 parent and a 6.2 parent, the child will be registered as 6.1. And then this is where we start, the next one, with a 6.2 parent and another 6.2 parent, the child will still be registered as 6.1. And then this is where we start to lose status. With a 6.1 parent and a parent with no status, the child is registered as a 6.2. And then with that 6.2, when that 6.2 child grows up and becomes a parent, with a parent that has no status, the child has no status. So what is not generally known is that there are 14 different categories of 6.1, and that's just on that slide that you just passed. Here we are, 6.1 entitlements. So that information, I believe these, all of these different entitlements are really detailed. But this is why we see so much disparity in who can pass on status in families. And we see siblings who cannot pass on status, we see siblings who cannot pass on their status and do not understand why. These charts are available on the Anishinaabeg Nation website and our social media page, and will probably get dropped into the chat as well, so that you can grab them and put them up, so you have them available. So once we start to work with the one-parent rule, there is some certainty that our children will continue to be a part of our Anishinaabeg family for generations to come. So now I'm going to jump ahead for a moment to Bill C-38, and there's a section on this slide here at the, there we are. This is one piece of unfinished business that I would like to address, and that has to do with Bill C-38, legislation that was tabled in Parliament in 2022 and was intended to address enfranchisement. Enfranchisement is a policy under the Indian Act that removed status of individuals who served in the military, obtained a university degree, and for other reasons who chose to be enfranchised, and for women who married someone who was enfranchised. So the women and their children were automatically removed from the Indian Register or not entitled to be registered upon birth. There were other provisions in Bill C-38 which included voluntary deregistration and enabling women who were automatically transferred to their husband's band on marriage. They are entitled to return to their original community along with their children. Due to the prorogation of Parliament, Bill C-38 will now have to be reintroduced in Parliament. The importance of Bill C-38 is, rather than going through these membership processes, full status would be provided to individuals who lost their status due to enfranchisement. We don't want to have them wrapped up into the second generation cutoff under the collaborative process, even though the government has included this in this process here now. There are approximately 3,500 people right across the country who would be entitled to be registered under Bill C-38. Before I leave this part of the presentation on second generation cutoff, I want to leave you with this message. I believe we have to move forward with a position of inclusion rather than exclusion. And that follows my teachings of don't leave anyone behind. Through all of this, the Indian Act and any attempts to bring our relatives back into our circle, some have already been left behind. So the next part has to do with Section 10 voting thresholds, and we'll get that up on the screen here in a moment. But before we go to those screens, as a backgrounder, under Section 11 of the Indian Act, the government is still determining who our citizens are. Under Section 10 of the Indian Act, these are the First Nations who have chosen to create their own membership codes and are the ones who determine who their members are. The difference between Section 10 and Section 11 is anyone who is added to membership under Section 10, they are provided with membership, but they may not have status. So government is still implicating themselves in our membership. And this is the reason why we have to get it right. So I'm going to follow through the messages on the screen, as these points are short and they were done very good by the staff. So I just want to, there's nothing I can add to them that isn't already here. So the Section 10 voting thresholds issues refer to the double majority required for First Nations to transition from Section 11 to Section 10 of the Indian Act. When transitioning to Section 10, First Nations can take control of their own membership by establishing their own rules and codes. The introduction of Bill C-31 in 1985 created two options for controlling band membership, Section 10 and 11 of the Indian Act, making registration and membership distinct. So next slide. So first Nations who are under Section 10, the department cannot add members to the First Nations list that have assumed control under Section 10. Membership is determined by the First Nation, and acceptance to a First Nation band that determines their own membership is dependent on the membership rules established by the band. Next slide, please. And for these First Nations, a registered person under the Indian Act who is or is not affiliated to them may or may not be recognized as a band member. A band member affiliated to a First Nations that controls membership may or may not be registered under the Indian Act. So now under Section 11, First Nations that have not been able to take control of their band membership under Section 10, their band membership lists are maintained by Indigenous Services Canada. And once a person is registered to a Section 11 band, they are automatically added to the band's membership. Next slide. Okay, so now on the actual voting now. So in order to go from Section 11 to Section 10, for a First Nation to transition to take control of their membership under Section 10, specific requirements must be fulfilled, particularly obtaining consent from eligible electors. So currently, consent is obtained only upon meeting a double majority voting threshold. This means that a majority of the eligible electors must participate in the vote, and of those voting, a majority must vote in favor. Only 2 First Nations have successfully completed the process in the past 10 years. This is partly due to the challenges in meeting a double majority voting threshold. As a potential solution to the second generation cutoff may result in an additional 225,000 or more members across the country, newly entitled individuals over time, it is necessary to consult whether an amendment to the existing infrastructure and process is desired. So an influx of new members will likely make it more difficult for bands to gain the consent of their eligible electors to transition to Section 10 as per the current double majority voting thresholds. Is that it? I think that's it for our slides. So I'd like to say miigwech for listening, encourage you to share the information with your family and relatives and those who have already been left behind, those people who are entitled to be registered, and get their input. Their input is also important in bringing them back into your family circles. So miigwech for your time, and pass it back to our chairman, Patrick.
Thank you, Marcia. And, folks out there in Northern Superior, I want to reemphasize just how important it is to have the more fulsome discussions that take place at your community level. There's going to be lots of situations arise. This difficulty they're having with thresholds is a big issue because, it's hard to track where our people are because they're all over the place. And it's very hard to meet that threshold. Just another point, how crucial it is for us to develop our own laws. The Indian Act is a piece of legislation that the government is trying to do away with. And part of the work that the UNDRIP process involves is to remove, the Indian Act in time. And while we're developing our citizenship laws, those laws, as you develop a citizenship law, will include all of your rights, whether they're your inherent rights, your treaty rights. Everything will be included in our own citizenship laws. So that's really important that we get back to determining our own citizens. At this juncture, Marcy, is there anyone online wants to ask a question, or is anyone on chat?
Not yet. We encourage you to put up your hand and I can unmute you if you want to ask a question. And if not, you can throw it in the chat.
Yeah, we'll give it a couple of seconds here to see if anybody wants to ask a question or make a comment. And again, a lot of times there's lots of information to digest here. If you think of something, don't hesitate to, come back on. And I'll repeat this a couple of times. LaRonde Mary, one word, LaRonde Mary, it's LaRondemary @gmail.com. There, it's on the screen there now. That is a contact that works with our citizenship commissioner, and she'll make sure that somebody gets back, to answer any questions you may have or any inquiries. And also, I want to just emphasize that when we actually, get down to the business of working on some of these laws in your respective communities, there's support available. From the Anishinaabe Nation. We're not there to tell you what to do, but we can give you examples. There's templates. There's examples of work that's being done, so you don't have to totally reinvent the wheel. You're going to find, when you get into these discussions, lots of scenarios are going to pop up. You'll be amazed. Something will come right over left field that you may not have thought of. In the past. There's lots of situations, and we have to find ways to grapple with them. And the solutions must be your solutions. Not Indian Affairs, not even the Anishinaabe Nation. They got to be Northern Superior solutions that work for your community. And it's the same with the other regions. Those regions, those solutions that are in Southeast or Southwest or Lake Huron, are applicable to them. But very importantly for Northern Superior, you have your perspectives and views that are important to you, and that's what's the most important part of this whole process, is to ensure that you are driving the process as the citizens of your communities. So, nothing yet, Marcy?
No, nothing.
I think we'll move
Marcy,
on.
Marcy, I think I saw Chief Machano's hand for a second. If you want to unmute him.
Okay, Chief Machano.
I gave you could just need to unmute, Chief.
Chief Machano.
Yeah, we had recognized all these things before, Patrick. How we move forward with this is the question. We're right in the middle of a land claim, and we don't want to move forward with a lot of these things until we get that land claim settled. We have talked to the membership about this over and over. Joanne, I'm not sure whether she's on here. She was going to join. Works on governance and membership, and she's told the people about this problem over and over and over. That the government's basically through this 6.1 and 6.2 processes is trying to terminate us, and basically at some point there'll be all non-status Indians on the reserve. And where's the funding going to come from? Because the federal government only funds status Indians. So one of the things that we're doing, if we can't reverse what they're doing, is we're trying to embark on a whole economic plan so that we have own source revenue coming in the future. Because we see it as and on a personal basis as well, Patrick, I firmly believe that's why the province and the federal government is pushing the Métis rights thing so hard, is that at some point they want us to be non-status and then we join the Métis. That I think is what their plan is.
Well, they're going to continue to try to, put these stupid designations in that water everything down to the point that, eventually Indigenous people will have no rights.
That there's no status Indians basically, and then they wash their hands of it. Yep. So yeah, we recognize that. How we deal with that going forward is the question. And I think that needs to be done, not just at the community or provincial level. That needs to be done nationally, because that's a national issue.
That's why this declaration is so important, Chief. When the declaration of our First Nations came about, that eventually went all the way to the national level, for the protections under the Constitution, I think, I'm hoping a similar thing will happen here. We'll
Right.
have as the Anishinaabe Nation a declaration, that even if they, as I said in my commentary earlier, the very important fulsome discussion needs to take place at each community. I think, there's could be, several years still before that outcome of that happens. But a declaration will serve notice, that there's work being done within the Anishinaabe territory
Yeah,
about determining our own citizens.
yeah, yeah. And we need to take the federal government out of the picture somehow.
Pat,
I
if
don't
I
Yeah.
could
know that
just jump in here too.
Sure, and that's why it's so important that we develop our own laws. Go ahead, Marcia.
Yes, one thing that I want to say, Chief, is I've been following the work that's been done at the Anishinaabe Nation over for a long, long time, and this is why I believe that the chiefs came up with the importance of having a one-parent rule instead of what the government was proposing as a two-parent rule, which does eliminate us over, a couple
Yep.
generations. So the
Yep.
one-parent rule will see that we'll see us be able to continue to pass on our membership to our future generations by
Yeah.
following that one-parent rule.
You're absolutely correct, Chief, about the government has never stopped in its attempts almost since Confederation about trying to get rid of our people. And even under the British North America Act, it says Indians and lands reserved for Indians. If there's no more Indians, they want the lands and the resources. I mean, you hear the politicians talking about fast tracking access to the natural resources of our territories, and that's what this not so hidden agenda is all about. Just as you point out, Chief.
Yeah.
Did you have any further commentary, Chief Mashano?
No, that's all for now.
Yeah, well, Chimigwech, very important commentary that you've shared here tonight. I think people have to be aware. If we don't do something about determining our citizens, that allows the federal and provincial governments and these Métis and others to creep in and try to claim who our people are. So I think we've got something on there in the chat, Marcy.
There's some comments. Our people need to use the MacGyver decision to protect further generations. And also the government has always tried to colonize our peoples.
Yes. And as Marcia, go ahead.
I also see Chief Mashano's technician is available to unmute if she had a comment based on what Chief Mashano had identified.
Hi, good evening. Joanne Mashano here. I'd like to thank Chief Mandabi, Marcia, and Dr. Lavalley for their comments and information. I think when we look at citizenship, it's such a big, gigantic, complex matter. There's so many different layers to that. And when we speaking about the conversations around membership and self-determination and its relationship to the federal government and their legal responsibilities to that, like that's one gigantic piece. And I think the issues that you've raised here, along with the stuff Chief Mashano has done, is a very central piece to this concept of membership. However, I think alongside of that, and I'm not going to speak for any other communities, but just understanding and sharing the observations in our community. And one of the other questions that we're adding to the questions that have been raised here is taking a look at that concept of belonging and identity, and looking at that piece at what makes us Anishinaabe, and in particular, what makes us Biktogong Anishinaabe. And how do we even want to ensure that some of the values, for example, from our ancestors, our grandfathers, our great-grandfathers, what are those values that held us together as a people? And what of those values do we want to continue to pass on to withstand the test of time? So in 2, 3, 4 generations, that there are, semblances of our people look like and behave like and share values that our ancestors in the past have. So that's really a question we're looking at also to say, what are those values that have traditionally made us Biktagong Nishnabeg, and what do we need to do inside of our communities, inside of our families, inside of our institutions to ensure those values, those ways of living, those ways of connecting with the land, connecting with community. How does our membership, if we want to call it codes, I don't know what the word is, how do those membership rules look at that issue of the transferring of values? And we better identify what those values we want to keep that inform us as a Anishinaabe, as a Biktagong Anishinaabe, and how I raise my children, how I educate, how we educate our children, what does our employment look like, what does our lawmaking system. So those values of being Anishinaabe have to be integrated. So it can't be just on a piece of paper to say, here's citizenship. No, raising citizens have to be ingrained in our culture, have to be ingrained in every which way in which we live. So that's the only thing I really want to add here is just how complex, the concept of citizenship is. So, Miigwech.
Yeah, Shtataha, that is a awesome commentary. Gazillion miigwechs for that, because that's the conversation that has to occur in our communities. You're bang on your assessment there, and I just want to also echo what Chief Mashano alluded to as well. We can never let the government off the hook for their fiduciary obligation, and also language is important. In this process, that's why we've used the word Ibangdalajig. Those that belong. But even on the international law, you're citizens of a nation. Being members of an Ininak band doesn't really give you any protection, because an Ininak band doesn't even have legal standing. So that's why it's so important that we talk about the right terminology and use our own value system, just like you described, Joanna. That's such a very appropriate approach that you start talking about there. That's exactly the kind of dialogue that needs to happen in our communities. Okay, I see a hand up, or was that you, Marcia?
Yes, that's me. I also want to just add, thank you, Joanne, for your comments, and to the chief for introducing his comments as well. I want to ask the staff to make note of your comments. Those are very important words that you shared, Joanne, and I just want them to take that and have a look at the draft document to make sure that everything's there, or if there's things that you've mentioned that we've missed in the draft, that they can be added. That's the whole purpose of having these virtual sessions. So I appreciate that. Thank you so much.
That was a very important commentary about those values. That's awesome. Okay, is there anyone else, Marcy?
We do have some comments from Regional Chief Hardy, and then Patty. We also have Leslie McGregor up next. Okay.
Waiting in the wings, yeah.
Okay,
well, maybe we should get to her, and then if we have time at the end, we can open it back up again.
Awesome.
I'm going to introduce Leslie McGregor. She's from Whitefish River First Nation, and she's been involved with working with First Nations that have adopted, the Anishinaabe Nation Governance Act, and there was an entity created called Moknagon. And this went into ceremony identifying what Moknagon meant. It talks about the wisdom and values of learning from the past, learning and watching what we're doing today, but more importantly, looking into the future about how we govern ourselves. And so she's, her and her staff, are working to really support communities on the development of laws. And this citizenship law is one of the ones that they're working on, and have had their people, even developing templates. And so I'm going to turn it over to Leslie to share, information, that some of the communities are doing. And we thank you for joining us again, Leslie. Miigwech, take it away.
Miigwech, Pat, and I do appreciate the invitation to speak As Pat mentioned, Makanagun was born out of the Anishinaabe Nation Governance Agreement Act, and our primary focus is on supporting the First Nations in implementation the governance agreement. So the governance agreement has 4 areas that it focuses on as First Nations move away from the Indian Act, and that includes citizenship, it includes language and culture, it includes elections or leadership selection, and operations and management. So as Pat had pointed out, part of the responsibilities for the team at Makanagun is to support the First Nations in their law development. And I think it's important to stress that once the First Nations have signed on to the Anishinaabe Nation Governance Agreement, it changes the status of the First Nation in terms of it is recognized as a formal government and they can create laws. So I did want to point out that the Indian Act is part of our colonial history, and it is designed to eradicate Indigenous peoples off this land and assimilate or eliminate First Nations people by providing a status number for the state to ensure that we stay oppressed. And I remember learning this in school when I was taking administrative law, that it was considered the worst violation of human rights in Canadian history. So, you know, with that premise, when you're looking at citizenship, you're really looking at nation building. So when you're looking at nation building, there's 4 main components of that. And that includes that the First Nation has a constitution, and that's where your laws are derived from. And I know some of the conversation before, when you're talking about values, that would go right in your constitution, and everything then stems from that. The other principle in nation building is the citizenship law. The third one had to do with governance law, and then the 4th one with your lands. So I know this particular conversation is about citizenship, so that's what I'm going to focus on. And I did want to stress that it is part of nation building itself, and it's related to nation building. And I see the PowerPoint is up there because it really, you know, strengthens the community's self-determination. So when you develop citizenship laws, you empower the nation, and really you're exercising your self-governance. When you establish the laws, you're affirming the right to make decisions that impact your members in your communities, and that reinforces your autonomy. It also is a recognition of inherent rights. So we talked about that. I know Marcia had mentioned it earlier, and certainly Dr. Corbier-Lavelle had mentioned it in terms of since time immemorial. These are rights that are inherent. They're not rights that we gained or that we lobbied for. They've been there since time immemorial. And they predate colonial rule. And that acknowledgement validates identity and sovereignty. The last part is the utilization of our own knowledge. That citizenship laws allows us to integrate, you know, traditional knowledge and values into contemporary governance. And by using these frameworks, we address modern challenges. And because that's the reality, we're not going to be able to go back to pre-colonial rule, that we have to be able to function in this particular society. But that doesn't mean that we eliminate all our values and our knowledge that we gain, especially in terms of governance itself, but that we've just modernized it, I guess, or allowed it to operate in this modern context without losing who we are. So I know Pat had mentioned that with Makanagun, we are supporting the First Nations who signed on to the Anishinaabe Nation Governance Act. And a lot of the communities, the first one that they tackled is the citizenship, their citizenship laws. And none of them have completed those yet, but some are closer than others. And a lot of it depended on really the engagement from the community. So there were some things that were important from that, I guess, is in terms of successes in developing these the first success would be that it does use a collaborative approach. Like, it is community based. The citizenship committees are, members in the community. It's not, consultants that are brought in or anything like that. They are people in the community addressing concerns that are happening there. And with that, they're creating their own guiding principles for those committees and how their citizenship law is gonna unfold. So it promotes that community involvement. And I think in order to have a strong law, that you're going to need these diverse perspectives in there. So, you have perspectives of people who live in different areas, some off territory, some, some on, and all the kinds of issues that come with those. The other part is, if it's coming from the community and the community is involved in all of this, and the laws certainly have to be approved by the community, that you're going to have that community support, like once it gets to those points of the law being ready to go. And as I said, I know one community in particular that's ready to take their law to the community, and we're supporting them on how they're doing those engagements. But it also, it really, by including the community in these kinds of decisions, it does build trust. The other part is these committees and communities are using the existing resources. As Pat had mentioned earlier, we're developing these templates around citizenship, and certainly accessing others, so that when the communities are developing, that they can use these tools in order to support their own development. So it really enables them to be looking at us, to look at Anishinaabe Nation and all these other systems that they can access in order to develop them. There's a interconnectedness across the governance areas. We know that when you're talking about citizenship, it's not just, the head count of how much you're going to get for how many status members you have in your community. Citizenship impacts everything about any First Nation government, from housing to education to lands. And that really then speaks to how much the community has to be involved in it, as well as the administration, because everything is impacted in there. The other is, the communities are really working on a proactive approach to solving this, and that's really important, because things need to be successes, and this is a really hard one to tackle. As I said, they went for the rough one first, and I think in that, when you're talking about solutions and the law themselves, I know some of the communities have talked about utilizing the one parent rule within their law. They're talking about the rights that their citizens will have, but I think also in there, they're talking about the responsibilities that these members would have. And in that law, then you can create things like, okay, maybe people have to learn the language within a certain period of time, that they have to be able to have basic Anishinaabe, or have to attend ceremonies. Like, those kinds of things you can actually put right into your law. And there are some challenges. It's not, as I said, citizenship impacts everything, and it's such a big, complex law that has to be developed. So there are challenges with that, and some of that has to do with, people are afraid that they're going to lose their status. But as an example, the governance agreement doesn't allow for that. It's a concern about the citizens, or the Anishinaabe, or the culture itself is going to be watered down. But you can put in, as I said, pieces in your law to preserve that. So that leads to some concerns around maybe understanding what exactly that would mean, and its impacts on everybody. And then part of it is making sure that the law itself and the terminology isn't really complex, that people don't understand what it means. Like, I really like the one parent rule that, or the Edidim. Oh my God, I can't say it now because I'm all nervous. The citizenship law, where it's very simple, right? Like, it's not complex. It's not detailed, it's not wordy, it's very clear about what it means, and that's what communities can do. Another issue has to, and I think this is a long-standing issue with a lot of First Nations, and that the trust that they have in leadership themselves. And with that trust, sometimes there's a bit of apathy, right? Where, people are used to this kind of system, so, why change it? And really to go back to what the technician was saying in terms of how do you then spark that maybe joy, I guess, and take those steps and those responsibilities of the citizens and the community members developing this law. And there's a historical context as well with our governance structures that we have to keep in mind, like the historical influences, like when we're talking about colonization. And certainly that you could see that within communities, and certainly the structure of how Canada funds First Nations is follows that. And we know that the Indian Act itself is just a colonial tool. So it's how do you move away from those kinds of things? And then the last part is the capacity. That's a big one for people to really for the people who could develop these laws. So for the Anishinaabe Nation Governance Agreement communities, they have Makangan that's supporting them. But that doesn't mean that supports everywhere for everybody who's developing their own laws. And some of them have done this on their own, and they're really strong laws. I've seen them, and we review them as part of what we do. But there's still sometimes that capacity and that human resource limitation within the communities. So the last part is that inclusivity and the ongoing commitment. As I said, having diverse perspective is really important for this. As Pat had pointed out earlier, when you don't really know until you're actually testing the law about what kind of things are going to come up and how that's going to be, how that's going to look in the law, or how it's going to be amended. How your dispute resolution processes, all those things have to be incorporated into that. And it really has to be ongoing. Like when we talk about the sustained efforts from leaders, that it really has something that has to be bought into, and that people understand the significance and importance of it and are willing to invest that time into it. So as I said earlier, I'm just going to close. I know that it's getting late and we're getting close to our time. I do want to just mention that I think it is important to ensure that when the laws are being developed, especially around citizenship, that the responsibilities are also included with that. And because that really, I think, is part and parcel of our own traditional ways of being and interacting with the world. Miigwech.
Thank you so much, and thank you to all the presenters tonight, and for any of the commentary that we heard. And again, I'll repeat: if anyone thinks of something, and that's generally, a natural progression here, where people think, "Oh, I just thought of something I should have mentioned, earlier tonight," or I'll think of something. LaRonde Mary, one word, LaRondemary @gmail.com. Any question or commentary can be put to her, and it'll get to the appropriate people for responding. There it is on your screen again. And I want to say Chimigwech to all of you folks in Northern Superior that joined. There'll be more commentary on this at the April 23rd Northern Superior meeting in Thunder Bay. Again, I stress the importance of talking this up with your families, talking this up with your neighbors, people in the community. Address it with your leadership to, move on this. The declaration is the one that's a little bit more time sensitive. We hope to get a final draft done by May 9th that can be taken to the Grand Council for adoption and then be sent to the government, to send them a very strong message to quit trying to promote this two-parent rule business. We have our own one-parent rule process. And then again, the need to have a fulsome discussion in our communities, over the next months and years, even, it could take, a substantial amount of time for all of our communities to really, deal with the citizenship law. As I said, lots going on in a lot of the communities, and it's very understandable. Communities will move at their own pace, but it's important that we, begin the dialogue and we can learn from each other. And there's some groups that are maybe a little further advanced on this. They'll break the trail a little bit, which is very helpful. So I'm going to turn it back to Mel and then Donna to close us up. Mel, if you have a couple commentary.
Yeah,
Closing
Pat,
commentary.
Jimmy Gush for that, Pat, and all the presenters and staff and such. But Pat, I think you said April 28th was the Northern Superior meeting.
Oh, 23rd.
23rd, yes. Okay, so you know what? I just want to say Jimmy Gush for everybody participating. You know, I remember when I was chief of my community and how easy the membership clerk was fast to decide 6162 without even a blink. And all that is a training, and the fact that that's all they had. And to a point too, I've seen some being very domineering and because of membership clerk. You know what I mean? And that's got to change. That's got to change because we're seeing our people. There's a lot of pretendians coming into our life right across Canada, probably the States even more. But and when we look at, I think there was down south, there was First Nation members and some communities becoming extinct. So we really need to get on this. We really need to work at it so we can ensure for the future of our great grandchildren, never mind great grandchildren, because you're right. And what I've seen in the last 9 years is I see the government trying to eradicate, and I think it's out of fear. Sort of fear because of their unknowing of what we can and will do. But for our people, and I've read all the comments and they're awesome, we really need to move in a way in unity for the things that we need to do. And that's true. When you talk about that bigger voice, we need to be able to do that and then get the attention, because we really need to have that attention of the powers to be to do what the things we need to do. Last bit, Pat, they said a human's being's greatest weakness is not the only things they're supposed to do when they're supposed to do it. So I think that one of these things is very important, and I just want to say Jimmy Gretsch again for the presenters, because it really filled a big gap inside my head today. Jimmy Gretsch.
Oh, Jimmy Gretsch, Northern Superior Regional Chief. So I'll turn it over to Donna to close us off. And thank you, everybody, once again.
Jimmy Gretsch Kanoya. Bonjour, Bev de Quedang de Go, Nishabe Quendao, Gigondo Demawe, she can be not magna. Mr. Chico, Miguet Chine de Benjet, Miguet Chananic, Misonic, Mishop Sananic, give it go big, give it in Dutch cake, give it away, she can da sick. Miguet Chananic, one that can keep target chickeno, Chinakiat. One that I was in Dutch gate, Miguet Omkina, Miguet Chickading, Miguet.
Good night, everybody. Thanks again for joining, and have a fantastic remainder of this week and future weeks.
Jimmy Gretsch. Bama P.
Bama P.
Bama.